Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas locales, regionales y mundiales. Por USA la Radio.
Buenos días amigos, están escuchando la mesa redonda por USA Radio, de Roundtable, del corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando MENDEZ, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Y bueno, traemos noticias locales, estatales, nacionales y hasta internacionales. Interesante, tal vez si hay tiempo hablo un poquito sobre este asunto que acabo de leer, que un mercenario que se le empleó en 1980, por allá por esa época, para que fuera a Medellín a asesinar a Pablo Escobar. Era en ese momento el más buscado narcotraficante y el más rico del mundo. Así que es un mercenario escocés. Si hay tiempo hablo sobre eso más tarde. Sí, a mí me encantan estas noticias que son como, son raras, son extraordinarias. Pero escuchando las noticias nacionales, temprano hoy, estaban entrevistando a un panel de doctores, médicos, investigadores, uno de los cuales fue un doctor que inició o que dirigió la investigación en cuanto al Human Genome Project, que se llama en inglés, ¿no? Es el proyecto ese para ver de qué estamos hechos, ¿no? DNA. Y muy interesante esto porque mencionaron que por primera vez en la historia una mujer recibió el premio Nobel por sus investigaciones en cuanto a las enfermedades relacionadas con el Human Genome Project. Así que muy interesante ese segmento noticiero y a ver si encontramos más información sobre este asunto. Entre tanto, bueno, por el mundo hay hasta el momento 29.3 millones de casos. 29.3, se acerca ya a los 30 millones de casos. Muertes, 2.632.041 muertes. En cuanto a los casos globales, infecciones, 118.695.000. Y encabezan la lista estos países, los Estados Unidos, por supuesto, India, con menos de la mitad de los casos que hay en Estados Unidos. Nosotros ya hemos llegado aquí a los casos más altos que hemos visto en Estados Unidos, con muertes en más de 500.000 de gentes. Pero está Estados Unidos en la cabeza, India en segundo lugar, Brasil. India y Brasil con 11 millones y pico. Rusia, United Kingdom, Francia y España. Y luego están por ahí cerca, están en la lista, estaban Argentina y Colombia. Esto del COVID, ahora, como he venido diciendo en estos últimos días, hay una sensación ahora de optimismo, nada más que escuchar a las gentes que han sido vacunadas, escuchar a mis amigos anunciando que ahora que vamos a estar todos vacunados podremos reunirnos de algún modo. aun cuando se mantengan las distancias y se usen las mascarillas, etcétera. Pero ya hay un ambiente más relajado entre la gente y se nota. Los restaurantes ahora, por nuestra ciudad, los restaurantes ahora ya no se va a poder encontrar una reservación. Se está llenando, porque todo el mundo quiere cenar fuera de su casa, porque hemos estado encerrados por meses. Acabamos de cumplir un año desde el primer anuncio del COVID. Y algunos de nosotros, algunos países están haciendo muy bien, han mejorado. Aquí en nuestra ciudad los casos ahora están más o menos lo que llaman flattening the curve, 132,000 casos en Filadelfia y 3,195 muertes. Es mucha gente, pero que ahora hay, hay esperanza de que todo esto se pueda controlar a medida que más gente se vacune. Entre más nos vacunemos, vamos a alcanzar ese número mágico en el cual ya se detiene el virus o el contagio. Es comparable al de la influenza, algo así. Triste para un país como Brasil. Desafortunadamente tienen un equivalente a Trump en Bolsonaro, un hombre irresponsable. Siempre les dijo a sus gentes, a su país, que dejaran de llorar, que dejaran de quejarse. Y mientras tanto, 2,000 muertos en un día nomás en Brasil. Fue un récord. Hasta, como mencioné anteriormente, creo que ayer o anterior, uno de los ex presidentes de Brasil, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, llamó a Bolsonaro un hombre estúpido. Lo que le dijo a la gente que dejara de llorar. Well, one of the biggest headlines this week should be about the absence of incumbent DA Larry Krasner at a candidates forum. He had been invited, along with Carlos Vega, who worked at the DA office until 2018, and attorney Charles Peruto. So these people, well, they responded separately to our questions about drugs, gun control, juvenile justice, and more. Carlos Vega didn't want to share the stage with Peruto. Peruto's answers to the issue of incarceration was to double down on drastic measures to control crime, especially a little bit harsh on juvenile crime. But anyway, he gave us some answers. But shame on Larry Krasner, who didn't show up. So I am not sure that we're going to issue another invitation. Apparently, we don't matter, we don't count. If he doesn't care, we might respond in the same way. It's a shame. And he speaks Spanish, and maybe he was afraid that we will ask him to speak Spanish, and he'll be embarrassed. I don't know. But he has us. He had us waiting up to the last minute for his arrival. Vega, on the other side, seemed to be, on the other hand, he seemed to be in a hurry, as though the invitation to the forum had come as a surprise. So we were very disappointed with those two candidates. One didn't show, the other one showed. Vega showed, and he said he had made other appointments. I cannot prove this, but I think he was just not interested in being on the same stage with Peruto and Krasner. He requested to be questioned quickly before Peruto or Krasner arrived, and he left immediately because he had other urgent meetings. Okay, that's not believable. Mr. Vega, for future reference, find another excuse. Because that's not how you handle an invitation and expect to gain votes from people you disrespect. You might be invited to come again. If we invite you, we set the rules for the interview, not you. So Attorney Peruto had no choice but to sit alone in front of the panel. He responded thoroughly to our questions, because now he had an opportunity to make stentorian speeches and announce draconian steps to deal with the rising crime rate, gun control, and drugs. But at least he seemed coherent, and he was responsive. So, thank you, Mr. Peruto, and sorry about Mr. Krasner not being interested in listening to us. Maybe that would be reflected in the Hispanic vote, if there is such a thing, because that's another question I often pose. Because we're not a monolith, and as we have said before, when they talk about the Hispanic vote, nationally even, the Hispanic vote, Puerto Ricans, for instance, they almost don't care about the issue of immigration. Mexican Americans who have been here, whose families were here hundreds of years, don't care. So the different groups have different issues. So for those of us who care about immigration, who want to talk about Venezuela, and Cuba, and Nicaragua, and the destruction of these economies with some Marxist dream, so we're going to talk about that. But and we vote accordingly. We look for candidates who might, at some future time, be interested in helping Latin America. As I have said many times, Latin America is sort of a footnote for most of these presidents, US presidents. As I keep saying, JFK put real money, 20 billion in 1960s money, behind his idea of helping Latin America. We thought that Obama might be good for that, for a more mature relationship with Latin America. Bill Clinton, neither one. So for different reasons, every president has been distracted by larger issues, or distracted by the Vietnam War for Johnson and Nixon. Well, Nixon was unhappy about Latin America. He had been his limousine had been attacked by tomatoes when he visited Caracas. So he didn't like Latin America, and he had no interest. He had more interest in China than Latin America. So anyway, we're going to take a short break here in Úsala Media, the Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.
Señores y señores de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con la mesa redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Danny Ramos controlando la máquina digital. El presidente acaba de hablar a la nación celebrando el hecho de que un triunfo para que se aprobara esta legislación en cuanto a darle unos cheques al pueblo, en cuanto a mejorar la situación económica, muchos pobres y clase media. A pesar de la oposición que encontró Biden en cuanto a esta legislación, los representantes en la Cámara Baja pues habían aprobado ya este rescue plan de rescate como resultado del COVID. Acabamos de cumplir un aniversario del COVID, cuando se anunció al mundo que era una pandemia. March 11 was the announcement from the World Health Organization that was a pandemic that threatened the health of the world. But we had no idea at that point how serious it was. One person who knew how it was transmitted and who knew what dangers it posed was President Trump, but he didn't want to tell us. He didn't want to tell the world. He didn't want to create panic. That's what he said. Oh, wow. Panic. He created panic with it, January 6th. What do we call that? It's a revolt. It's a failed coup, insurrection. Basically gathering some criminal elements to undo democracy. And we're going to keep hammering on that because we should not forget. It was very, very difficult for this country. And here's a curious note. How can the senators and the representatives whose lives were threatened, because we know that if the rioters had gotten hold of Nancy Pelosi or some other prominent Democrat like Schumer or the vice president, that it could have been a lot worse. That thanks to the actions of one of the Capitol Hill policemen, that one of the policemen who guided the rioters in a direction away from where the senators were hiding. So that helped. But we insist this is not going to be forgotten. I think these people, the FBI every day is releasing more and more information about the people who took part. They have identified many of them. They have, in many instances, they don't have a name, but they have a description. They have a video of these people, and they may not have their identities, but they will soon have them. It's curious that what they need to find out, what the FBI needs to find out, is who was the intellectual author of this, who promoted it, and funded it, perhaps, because a lot of people who have been found to have no meaningful employment came to Washington and traveled to Washington And so who financed those trips? How did they get money to travel and to stay at some hotels nearby? So those are questions that the FBI should and will clarify. James Comey, by the way, said a while ago that he's predicting that there will be more serious actions, more serious crimes committed by these insurrectionists. But in the days after January 6th, so many of them have been arrested, and the thousands that are being investigated by the FBI. So they may be slowed down by the investigations. Some of them may change their minds too, that when they see that they were betrayed by a president who said, "Oh yeah, I'm on my way to the Capitol. I'll join you there. I'll be with you." And we know he didn't. He didn't go near. He stayed at the White House watching, apparently in glee, watching the developments, because his people that loved him, were trying to destroy democracy to keep him in power. And I still get arguments from people. More than 72, 73 million voted for Trump. You cannot account for how people can be deceived. You cannot account for the amount of credibility that somebody with Trump's personality can develop. You know, he obviously reminds everybody of the great caudillos, the people of the not so distant past, but almost a century ago. Adolf Hitler had this vision for his nation, and he was able to sell one of the supposedly brightest and best educated nations on earth. He managed to convince them of a task ahead to destroy the Jewish population, he hated them for whatever reason. There are books that suggest that he was upset because he was not accepted at the school where he wanted to be an architect. But you can never account for how the masses can become gullible, and how can they buy into a message like the one that comes to mind more frequently is the Jonestown people, Reverend Jones, who 900 people followed, and so they were assassinated basically by this charlatan. And so that comes to mind. How can some people believe in this so much? And then you listen to supposedly smart, well-prepared, experienced politicians like Senator Lindsey Graham, humiliating himself, licking Trump's boots by saying that he's grateful that the president allowed him 2024. There are just too many things up in the air right now, from the Southern District of New York to all the lawsuits around the country against him to change the results of the election. And now his minions in Georgia and Arizona and many other places are trying to change the way we vote. And so, we should be worried about that. We should be concerned about how working state by state, many Republicans are attempting to change the state's voting laws so that they will alienate minorities, especially blacks and Hispanics, and it will make it easier for them to manipulate elections in those states. In Georgia, particularly outrageous, because they know they lost 2 senatorial seats because people went to the polls, because people voted. So what have they decided to do? Stop people from voting. So they want to stop Sunday voting. They want to stop mail-in voting. They want to stop people from going to vote, period. And so, and that's a sort of a revenge because they lost, because Georgia lost those 2 senatorial seats. That changed the makeup of the Senate for good. And that's the only way that so many things can happen in this country. Imagine if it was still Mitch McConnell leading the Senate, there would not be this bill that the COVID relief bill that President Joe Biden has signed. And apropos of that, because there are checks coming, $1,400 for a lot of people. They say the checks might be in your mailbox, in your bank account as soon as the weekend, for instance. Now, that's speed. So let's hope that that's true. But again, there wouldn't be any of that. There will not be any legislation getting past Muscovich's desk. Despicable individual. He and his wife enriched themselves during the Trump administration. That's why he was fighting so hard to keep Donald Trump in power, even though in his heart of hearts, he despises Trump. Why are they Republicans supporting a man who lost them all the power they had? Lost the White House, lost Congress, the lower house, lost the Senate, lost elections in Georgia. Why are they so determined to support this man? You know, Lindsay says that Trump has been kind enough to allow him to live in his world. Who wants to live in that world? Because at this moment, Trump's world is in panic, and it's full of lawyers getting ready to fight because, and actually not the top lawyers, he cannot find really well-known names to support him. So he has to pay a lot of money, not to the best legal talent available. So all roads lead to Trump. We end up talking about him no matter where we start. Anyway, estamos aquí en la mesa redonda de Roundtable, del corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.
Señores oyentes de USA la Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Bueno, el presidente acaba de declarar que es el día de la independencia para él, es el 4 de julio, independencia del COVID. Así que es una celebración doble, celebrando la independencia de Estados Unidos y celebrando la independencia del COVID, luego de que ha firmado esta legislación que acaba de pasar en un Senado que controlan los demócratas, pero con un margen, el mínimo margen, donde cuando sea necesario, la vicepresidenta Harris va a tener que llegar allí a ponerle fin al empate. So, yes, Biden has declared Independence Day, July 4th, speech after signing COVID relief bill. So, it's great. And there are some aspects of that bill that we should highlight. 1,400 stimulus checks, $1,400. If you for you to qualify for that, you have to make less than 80,000 as an individual, 150,000 as a couple, with limited amounts for people making above 150, between 150 and 160. So, but those are the bare bones of this. Tax break for essential low-income workers. Good. Child care investment, expanded child tax credit, housing assistance. So, and this is 1 year of COVID, and this is where we are right now. So let's hope that this bill does what it says, what it's supposed to do. The contrast that we keep hearing is with the last similar amount of money that passed in 2017, and it went to benefit the 1% of the 1% of the rich people. This one is supposed to go to middle class and poor people. Most of it. It's money for everybody, but most of it is for small business, for middle class, families with children that they need the money for education. They need the money just to feed their families sometimes. It's sad to read about how many children are suffering hunger in this country. One of the richest nations on earth. Children are going hungry. That's a disgrace. But this is where we are, 1 year of COVID. A year ago, Dr. Fauci said things will get much worse. But now he says he had no idea how much worse it was going to get. He had no idea at that point. He was only talking in terms of, from his medical point of view, in terms of how the virus was going to expand, how to it was going to be spreading throughout the nation. But the economic consequences is something that nobody was able to foresee until it began to happen. When schools closed, business shut down, people's jobs were lost, and so many of us started working from home, those of us who had any employment at all. So that was amazing. So one thing that happened during this speech, and I have to read this report because it's interesting, of human interest. Now, 15 minutes of fame. Remember that, the Andy Warhol thing that everybody would have 15 minutes of fame. Kirsten Hess wasn't watching President Joe Biden's primetime address on Thursday, marking 1 year of the COVID pandemic. But she got about 20 text messages telling her to turn on the TV. Last summer, I was in Philadelphia and I met a small business owner, a woman, Biden said. I asked her, I said, what do you need most? Never forget what she said to me. She said, look at me right in the eye, and she said, I just want the truth. The truth. Just tell me the truth. Hess, a Lehigh Valley bookstore owner, said late Thursday that Biden was describing their interaction at a campaign event in June. An Inquirer reporter attended the event, which was actually at a restaurant in Yadin, just west of Philadelphia. Hess said it was also broadcast on TV at the time, which is how friends watching on Thursday knew Biden was talking about her. So said her 15 minutes of fame because she had a chance to speak directly to the president. And what did she say? She didn't say like, I want a check, I want health care. She said something more important in terms of our leaders. Tell me the truth. I want the truth. And that's interesting to think about that aspect of leadership. As we know, the Washington Post sort of certified 30,000 lies or exaggerations coming from Donald Trump. But most of his lies didn't have serious consequences until the January 6th riot. There were other presidents, and they named a Bush father who propagated the lie that children and babies in Kuwait, after Hussein invaded, that babies had been killed. And he used that to get support for the war against Iraq. So that had major consequences. And W, the same thing. He somehow managed to drag the country into a war. And so those things have serious consequences. Americans will die anytime we have a war fighting overseas. So what lies have more of an impact? And there's an article precisely speaking about these presidents who have lied to us. You know, Clinton, but Clinton was denying something related to the sex scandal that caused his impeachment, and not lying about the war or something more meaningful. Nevertheless, people, many women especially, are displeased with Clinton's lies. But the bigger impact was the one from Bush and also from Lyndon Johnson to justify getting us into a bigger war in Vietnam. So those lies have consequences, and the big lie in the Trump administration, at the end of his administration, the big lie was that he won the election, that the election was stolen, and that led to the horrific events of January 6th. So that lie had serious consequences. People died. Democracy felt threatened. So it does matter when the president tells the truth, and it's pertinent to have a business person, as this woman in Pennsylvania, that said to Joe Biden, the truth. Just tell me the truth. That's the least we can expect from our leaders, to be told the truth. And that, for me, that's one of the biggest failures of leadership, not to deal with the truth. And now we have Andrew Cuomo in New York also in the same situation with his people are calling for his resignation because he covered up. He did not tell the truth about the number of people dying in nursing homes. So that was a direct consequence of not telling the truth. Same thing in California. The governor that said to the people that no, stay home, don't do anything. Then he was found to be at one famous restaurant. So it's one of those very serious things that as leaders, it is one of the most responsible things to do is to tell people the truth. When you govern, you must govern with the truth. It does no good to lie to the people because eventually we find out the truth. From Watergate to Clinton to Bush to Trump. One of the things, the article that I was speaking about, one of the things it pointed out was that the idea that Washington could not tell a lie was something his biographer made up, that he was in fact capable of exaggerating or lying. But there are no, there's no record of Washington being a liar of the size of Trump. Yeah, well, we're happy to celebrate the 15 minutes of fame of Miss Kristen Hess, who asked Joe Biden to tell her the truth. Tell us the truth, Mr. Biden. And so to that effect, Mr. Biden has been telling us the truth with COVID, with what he's doing, with, sort of keeping to his promise to do 100 million vaccines in 100 days. And we are on target for that. And in fact, way beyond the 100 million. I think the vaccine is progressing tremendously. And that's why Mr. Biden feels that this is, that he is at a point where he can declare that we're going to be without the virus, that we're going to have a way to defeat this virus. It's important for him to actually have this in his back pocket so that he can say, this is what I have done. I have kept my word on this. And we can see the huge contrast. And that's where leadership comes in. The huge contrast in the energy behind the fight against COVID, in the money to fight COVID, in the rhetoric, sort of supporting the scientists who know and going along with whatever regulations are required, and that we have found out what works and what doesn't. And for instance, just masks. If that has been the main reason we are doing well, let's keep supporting that. Bueno, amigos, vamos a tomar otra breve pausa aquí en Úsala Media de Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.
Señores oyentes de Úsala Media, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable, desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Estamos hablando de COVID y la lucha contra el COVID y cómo como evidentemente este gobierno actual, el gobierno de Biden, ha puesto dinero, energía, la retórica, inclusive las palabras importan, apoyando el punto de vista científico. Y hemos visto el progreso, el tremendo progreso que se ha hecho con las vacunas, en donde el gobierno ha actuado con efectividad. Todo lo contrario de las falsas promesas del gobierno anterior. Yo todavía, bueno, no lo esperaba. Nunca llegamos a ver el plan que tenía Trump para la salud, his healthcare plan. We never saw it. And the charade of his press secretary, so carrying a very heavy folder that supposedly contained the plan that was never unveiled. And Leslie Stahl was the object of this charade when the White House press secretary handed her this huge folder that actually contained nothing but papers signed by the president, but nothing in relation to anything. It was just a charade. It's like, here, take this. And neither Leslie Stahl nor anybody in the world knew what that was about, except the charade, except one more way to lie, exaggerate, and distort, and pretend that you are the smartest person in the world and you can fool everybody all the time. You cannot fool all of the people all the time. So far, you have only managed to fool some people some of the time, because even your adherents to Trump are dropping out. And now, for some other news, the Governor DeSantis, as we know, got in hot water for giving priority with COVID, the vaccine to the rich people in South Florida. But one of the things that Fauci has recommended for all the states to be careful as they relax the laws that had been put in place to deal with COVID. Opening large venues to gatherings, opening restaurants, opening schools, and all that. It can be done now. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It can be done, but it should be done carefully. So we are slowly returning to normal, whatever normal is going to be for us in the future. Connecticut, Maryland, New Jersey announcing rollback restrictions in the next few days. There is pressure in many states to open schools. The Colorado governor announced restrictions will be phased out, and he extended mask wearing until April. So that's one of those measures that is sort of easy to implement, easy to keep enforcing, even if not everybody complies. Wearing masks obviously works and has helped to deal with the pandemic. So don't forget that. Even now, as we are being vaccinated in ever increasing numbers, let's not forget that these measures that have been suggested by the doctors are still valid, still applicable. Wearing masks, washing our hands, social distancing, etc. So that still should continue. One piece of good news. Merrick Garland, who had been, Barack Obama wanted him to be a Supreme Court judge, and then Mitch McConnell never gave him an opportunity. But now he is the new Attorney General. So the Republicans may come to regret that that Garland is in charge of the Justice Department as opposed to being a Supreme Court judge. Why? Because one of his priorities, as he declared, was the investigation into the January 6th insurrection. That is a priority. So let's see what happens. Because, as we know, what the FBI and other investigations are doing right now is trying to find out who promoted it, who funded the insurrection, who paid all these people, how were they housed in Washington, and so on. How many of them had contacts inside the administration? So it's despicable that Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz and other people like that are still representing the people, supposedly. But, you know, their day will come also, I think. I find both of them really objectionable, especially when I listen to Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz try to change the conversation away from the fact that Trump motivated that insurrection. They try to change the conversation to the means of investigating them, trying to accuse the FBI and the investigators of taking extra legal measures to gather information. So that's the role that Republicans, and I say they're going to regret that now Merrick Garland is going to be the Attorney General. And unlike Bill Barr, remember Bill Barr? The most embarrassing performances by any Attorney General. I think but since John Mitchell in the Nixon administration. But Bill Barr, who sold his soul to Donald Trump. And he was instrumental in sidelining the Mueller report because he gave us 4 pages of a summary that did not contain what the report contained. So I think Bill Barr should be investigated as to why did he do that. Anyway, so we celebrate the arrival of Merrick Garland to serve as Attorney General of the United States. And I hope he succeeds in his investigation. One last item, curious, because of the age in which we live, there is a digital artwork has just sold for $69 million. Digital artwork. And you look at it, you say, like, why? Why would that be worth so much money? I have no idea, really. Art is always puzzling. Why art? It's something that we decide for a while that is interesting and worthwhile, and we pay a lot of money, or we dislike. And I don't understand this digital thing because it must have some intrinsic value that escapes me for the moment. Anyway, señores oyentes de Usa la Media, we want to thank you for listening to us today. Muchas gracias por su sintonía en el día de hoy. Se despide Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital aquí en la mesa redonda de Roundtable. Hasta la próxima. Thank you, Dan.
Saludos amigos, los invitamos a escuchar la mesa redonda de Roundtable, donde discutimos los temas del día, hablando de política, educación y otros temas, locales, regionales y mundiales, por USA la Radio.